Today's video is not a $15 deck. Today's video is entirely for me, so if you're here for the budget decks, that's not what we're doing today. This deck does have an upper budget, but I set the budget as a pet deck to $100, which is way more than I normally do on this channel. But I do want to see what this kind of not budget, but very definitely a pet strategy that I wanted to run with idea. I wanted to see how this works out. And just so y'all know, this video is made entirely because of my love for one card, and that is Broodmate Dragon. When I was a kid, and I couldn't really afford that many Magic the Gathering cards, I pulled a Broodmate Dragon from a pack during the Shards of Alara block, and I managed to build a very powerful Jund sacrifice value deck with cards like Sprouting Thrynax and Predator Dragon. But Broodmate Dragon was my favorite card from the entire set. I adored this thing, and I was so happy when I was able to get more than one of them in the deck, and I had to trade more cards than I thought I would normally be able to. It was like $5 worth of trades, but again, I was a kid with no allowance, so the ability to even get more than one Broodmate Dragon was very difficult for me to not be excited about. And then this was printed in the DISA Precon. Broodmate Tyrant, a retrained, power-crept Broodmate Dragon. This thing fascinated me. Somebody at Wizards of the Coast really enjoyed Broodmate Dragon the way that I did, else this random non-legendary creature wouldn't have gotten a new Broodmate. So I figure, why not go ahead and build a Jund Dragons deck? Broodmate Dragon was from the Jund block. He was from the Jund Shard on Alara, and Broodmate Tyrant mentions the Jund Tyrant by name. So let's go ahead and build the Tyrant himself. Karthus, Tyrant of Jund. This deck has a $100 limit. I am not able to spend more than that to build this, which I know is not saying a lot given what this channel normally does, but I really wanted to build big, dirtily Jund dragons. So let's go ahead and talk about that. I'm here to gush. Karthus, Tyrant of Jund is a Jund and 4 dragon with 7/7 flying and haste, gives all of your other dragons haste, and also takes control of every dragon on the battlefield and gives it to you permanently. Holy shit. This card punishes people for playing Maskwood Nexus, punishes people for having the audacity for playing dragons themselves. This card can harm a lot of decks. The DISA deck with the Maskwood Nexus in it, if they're trying to Maskwood Nexus their Tarmogoyfs together, they become our Goyfs, comrade. So what are we trying to do here? Well, it's very simple. We are leaning super heavily into the Jund theme for dragons. We want big, we want dirtle, we want haste, we want giant things that threaten our opponents and make them terrified when they touch the board. So why not bring the biggest dragon in all of Jund, Hellkite Overlord, as the first card we get to talk about. Hellkite Overlord has flying, trample, haste, fire breathing, and the ability to regenerate itself. And again, we're talking about cards that I have a personal history with. A friend of mine when I was growing up played a Death Render deck with Hellkite Overlord as the top end alongside Progenitus. This was an insane thing for me to see. I had never seen cards cheated on the board like that, but since I came from Yu-Gi-Oh!, where cards like Monster Reborn were very, very common, I really resonated with this strategy, so I want to go ahead and throw it in here. The only job of this is to be a giant dragon that's hard to deal with. And let's go ahead and throw dragons from other dragon-centered planes in here as well. We have Atarka, the World Render, to give all of our dragons double strike. Coligan, the Storm's Fury. Whenever he attacks, all of our creatures get 1/0 until end of turn, and he's also got dash so we can recur him. Let's also put Daragaz, the Reincarnated, in here. Flying, trample, haste. If this card would die, exile it with an egg counter and bring it back in 3 turns. Let's also add Scourge of the Throne in here, so we have multiple combat steps. Thrakkus the Butcher in here to double the power of all of our dragons. And Hellkite Charger, another way to give us multiple combat steps. Let's also add in a small dragon token sub-theme because of Broodmate Dragon being the entire reason I wanted to build this thing. Broodmate Dragon's a 4/4 that puts another 4/4 red dragon into play. Broodmate Tyrant does the same thing, but it has Encore, so you can get it back from the graveyard. Skyline Despot gives us the Monarch, which gives us access to draw, while also letting us spawn a 5/5 dragon token. And Lathliss will give us a 5/5 dragon token and mass fire breathing anytime we drop a dragon on the board and then pay 2 mana for the fire breathing ability. All in all, these cards are doing a ton of damage to our opponents when they touch the board. But let's not stop with the named dragons just yet. Let's add Bladewing the Risen to the deck. When it touches the battlefield, we get to get a dragon permanent from our graveyard back to the battlefield, and he has a fire breathing effect too, giving all dragons we have 1/1 until end of turn if we pay 2 mana into it. It's a stronger version of Lathliss. And then we have Rivaz of the Claw, a ramp piece that lets us get 2 mana in any combination to cast dragon spells, and also lets us cast dragon spells from the graveyard with the finality counters before finality counters became a concept in Magic the Gathering. All of these are gigantic beasts that must be dealt with when they touch the board, and I think that's exactly what you want a dragon deck to be. We want it to be big, we want it to be stompy, we want it to be something threatening. So let's talk about how we're going to draw lots of cards to threaten our opponents then, shall we? Because we are such a mana-hungry deck, we have a huge draw package to dig through our lands and everything else. So let's go ahead and start with named dragons once more, with Korvold Gleeful Glutton. When this card swings, when it deals combat damage to a player, put X/1/1 counters on it and draw X cards, where X is the number of permanent types in our graveyard. I've already built a previously very powerful Voltron deck with this, and I think this card is fantastic for the Jund Dragons theme. Then we have Monstrous Vortex to give us Discover X whenever we cast a creature spell with mana value 5 or greater, which is most of the creatures in this deck, as they are all dragons. Then we have cards like Garruk's Pack Leader, Garruk's Uprising, Up the Beanstalk, and Elemental Bond to let us draw cards when we cast big spells. Then we have cards like Big Score and Seize the Spoils and Unexpected Windfall to draw multiple cards, discard cards out of our hand to feed Korvold, and also generate treasures to cast big dirtily dragons. Then, to make use of the big power of our dragons, let's use cards like Richkar's Expertise to draw cards equal to that power, and then be able to cast anything for free. Return of the Wildspeaker will do the same thing, but also gives us a big +3/+3 to our board if we need that on a later turn. Disciple of Freyalise can help us with this as well, sacrificing one of our dragon tokens to draw 4 or 5 cards depending on the token. Valakut Awakening gives us access to a free hand reshuffle when we need it, because it is a wheel that also gets to be a land on the back side. Then Dragonborn Champion will let us draw a card anytime one of our sources deal 5 or more damage to a player, which is just swinging at somebody with a dragon. And Dragonhawk Fate's Tempest is going to be a game-closing win condition, while also giving us access to Impulse Draw, letting us grab cards from the top of our library into exile, where we can cast them whenever it attacks or enters the battlefield. And at the end of the turn, for anything we don't use, we get to deal 2 damage to each opponent. With our board states we're going to be making with this is always going to burn our opponents for 6 to 10 damage. The card's nutty in most decks, and in our deck, it's just going to be one more reason our opponents get burned to death. But let's go ahead and talk about interaction, because we wouldn't be a Tyrant of Jund deck if we weren't causing problems for all of our opponents, would we? We are running a 16-card interaction pile, beginning with Gluttonous Hellkite, another dragon from Jund. This card has Jund mana and paying XX. When we cast this spell, each player sacrifices X creatures, and Gluttonous Hellkite gets 2/1/1 counters for every creature sacrificed this way, and it's got flying and trample. This is a retrain of a Predator dragon from Jund. You cannot convince me otherwise. Let's go ahead and put Wasatora Nekoru Queen, another named dragon. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, force them to sacrifice a creature, and if they can't, we make a cat dragon token. Let's also add some MDFCs like Hagra Mauling and Fell the Profane. They get to be lands on the backside and let us blow up creatures willy-nilly. But let's also add fight spells and deal damage to spells that are MDFCs like Colony Ambush, Bridge Works Battle, and Stump Stomp. Each of these will take our dragon's power and use them as cudgels against our opponent's cards. If we need to get rid of particular cards, though, we can also use cards like Chaos Warp and Beast Within to get rid of any kind of permanent that we happen to deal with. Let's also add in another named dragon in Drakaseth, Maw of Flames. Whenever it attacks, we'll deal 4 damage to any target and 3 damage to any 2 other targets. This is a powerhouse of a creature that we get access to in dragons. Scourge of Valkast says whenever it or another dragon touches the battlefield, deal X damage to any creature or player, where X is the amount of dragons we control. It also has fire breathing attached to it. This can be used as a game-winning play or just a way to eat somebody's life total down a little bit. Dragon Tempest gives all of our dragons the ability to do the Scourge of Valkast ability when they touch the board, and also gives them all haste. Vivictus Asmati the Dire also is a named dragon, an Elder Dragon specifically. When it attacks, for each player, choose a permanent they control and sacrifice those permanents. Every player who did reveals the top card of their library and puts it onto the battlefield if it is a permanent. Vivectus is a repeatable Chaos Warp for all of our opponent's cards. We're also going to add Frontier Siege in here to give us access to ramp if we need it, or an Omnipresent Fight spell to burn our opponent's stuff down with our big creatures. And Zeatura the Incinerator to top it all off with another big dragon. When this at the beginning of our end step, we can sacrifice another creature, like our dragon tokens, deal damage equal to their power to any target, like another creature, and then generate 3 treasure tokens, meaning we have a more smooth following turn. I said that was the end of it, but no, we have one more Assassin's Trophy, blowing up any permanent, and then getting our opponent a land in exchange for that. Finally, we are running 3 board wipes. Deathbringer Regent touches the board and will blow up all other creatures if there are 5 more creatures on the board. Play this when you are seeing a very, very dire board state that you need to reset. If you want to have asymmetrical, though, we are going to be using Crux of Fate, blowing up all non-dragon creatures. The last board wipe we're going to be using is going to be Necromantic Selection. This card blows up all creatures, and then we get to return any creature card from our graveyard to the battlefield. Probably just going to be our commander when we do that, all things considered. That said, let's go ahead and talk about how we're going to afford all these really expensive cards. Let's get into the ramp section. This deck is running a 21 card ramp section. Each of these is either a dragon cost lowerer, or some other form of powerful ramp. Let's begin with Swashbuckler Extraordinaire. When this touches the battlefield, we make a treasure, and we can sacrifice treasures to give any creature double strike. Jade Orb and Cornelian Orb of Dragonkind can give hexproof and haste to a dragon respectively, and also count as ramp. Patron of the Arts gives us a treasure when it touches the board and when it dies. Rapacious Dragon makes 2 treasures when it touches the board. Goblin and Acromancer will make all of our green and red spells cost 1 less. Ganex makes a treasure anytime a dragon touches the battlefield. Arcane Signet's 2 mana rock. Dragon Lord Servant discounts all of our dragons by 1. Dragon Speaker Shaman discounts all of our dragons by 2. Decadent Dragon gives us opponent's deck impulse draw, and also a treasure token if we swing with it. And then we get to the more basic ramp spells like Rampant Growth to get a basic land, Cultivate to get a basic land, Farseek to get a not forest, Kadama's Reach to get a basic land, and Nature's Lore to get a forest from the deck. We're also going to be running the mana rocks Soul Ring and Dragon's Horde. Soul Ring because yeah, it's a budgetless deck, we're going to be doing that, and Dragon's Horde because it gives us access to draw on top of its massive 1 mana of any color. Then we're going to have an Ignoble Hierarch to give us access to Exalted and Jund mana, and finally a Goldspan Dragon to generate treasures. And once again, I did the thing where I said finally because I forgot. We also have Savage Ventmaw. Whenever this attacks, add 3 red and 3 green to your mana pool. Wow, that is a lot of ramp. But we're not done yet, because we still need to talk about the land base, and this is where I skimped a little bit in terms of what we are working with. I wanted to make sure that we had plenty of budget for the big dragons, so here's where you could probably do the most upgrades later on. We have 3 forests, 3 mountains, and 3 swamps, and then we have the Checklands, Dragon Skull Summit, Woodland Cemetery, Tainted Peak, and Tainted Wood. Each of these cares about the different lands we have on the board to operate as better land pieces. Then we have the fetching lands, Jund Panorama, Myriad Landscape, and Twisted Landscape, and the filter lands, Viridescent Bog, Shadowblood Ridge, and Mossfire Valley. We're running 5 Omni lands with Exotic Orchard, Command Tower, Temple of the Dragon Queen, Unclaimed Territory, and Haven of the Spirit Dragon, and some searchable duels as well for our Farseek style abilities like Canyon Slow, Cinder Glade, Smoldering Marsh, and Haunted Mire. We're also running some pretty big utility lands in here, like Bojuka Bog to get rid of graveyards, Spine Rock Knoll, and Mosswort Bridge to give us access to Hideaway for free spellcast when we need it. And I'm not going to go too far into most of the land pieces right now anymore. You know what most of these do, at least I hope you do. If not, pause the video when you did. I'm going to get to the gameplay because I'm excited to play some Big Turtle Dragons! Let's talk about keepable hands. We want a hand that is able to ramp a lot, remove a problem, and also draw us cards. But if we have an excess of the ramp, we can maybe get away with not worrying with it too terribly much. Looking at our hand, we have a Dragon's Tempest for haste and the ability to blow up shit. We also have 1, 2, 3 ramp spells. Honestly, this may just be a keepable hand, so let's go ahead and work with it. We'll keep our hand, draw our first card, and play a forest as our first card of the game. Second turn comes up, and we're going to play a mountain, tapping 2 to get that Goblin and Necromancer on the board to discount all of our cards in the following turn. Next turn comes up, and we can go ahead and play Smoldering Marsh. We're going to pay 2 to play Kadama's Reach, getting us 2 lands from the deck, and 1 to play our Dragon Lord Servant in order to discount our dragons even more. Our next turn comes up, and we have Rivaz of the Claw here. We're going to go ahead and take a look at what we got, and I think the best thing to do is to get Dragon Tempest on the board. And we can't really cast our commander just yet, so we're going to pay 2 mana. We're going to have to do it a very particular way, though. We're going to say that the Exotic Orchard is what we play. The Exotic Orchard does give us access 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So again, we can't play the commander just yet, but we can go ahead and get Rivaz online. This means that we will be able to get our commander out very easily and start harming players. Turn 5 comes around, and Haven of the Spirit Dragon is in our hand. We don't need this just yet, so we're going to pay 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and actually, we don't need all that. We only need to pay 5 for our commander. Our commander comes out. All of our dragons will have haste. If anybody has dragons, we now have those dragons. And we can go ahead and punch somebody in the face and burn one of their creatures away with the Dragon Tempest ability. We punch somebody with Rivaz. And looking at where we're at right now, we can go ahead and play... Let's just go ahead and say play that Swamp. And tap 1, 2, 3 for Valakut Awakening, putting these cards on the bottom of my deck and drawing a fresh set of 3. Turn 6 comes around, and we've drawn a Hagra Mauling. Let's go ahead and play that Mosswort Bridge and see what we get access to. Ooh. Oh, these are fantastic. I think of all of these, the Scourge of the Throne is probably the most threatening one we have access to. So let's go ahead and put Scourge of the Throne under our Mosswort Bridge. Next turn, we will have access to that, and these other cards can go on the bottom of our library. Looking at what else is in our hand, we can go ahead and pay 2 to cast Seize the Spoils, discarding the Arcane Signet we don't need at the moment, to draw 2 cards and generate 2 treasure tokens. We have plenty of lands, so we can actually pay 2 more mana and cycle this Canyon Slow away to replace it with another card we get to draw. And at that point, we can go ahead and swing Karthus at whoever we need to. Honestly, they can just get cucked for all we care. Turn 7 comes around, and we get to do a pretty massive turn at this point. We're going to go ahead and play Twisted Landscape, or let's say that we have a Reanimation player around. Let's go ahead and get rid of their favorite graveyard. Then we're going to use Mosswort Bridge in order to get our Scourge of the Throne on the board. This is going to burn one of our opponent's cards away, and now we can go ahead and tap Rivaz to spend 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 mana and get our other big dragon, Derigaz Reincarnated, on the board. Anytime Derigaz gets killed, we're going to replace him, but we're also burning another problematic card away since we've done this. We go ahead and swing with everything, harming one person, untapping our creatures, and harming that person again. This may just end the game for that player right now. Depends on what their and our life total looks like. With what we have right here, though, we don't need this Twisted Landscape, so we're going to hold up 4 mana and see if we have to use it. Let's assume our opponent's got a commander or other problematic card on the board, and we're going to cast Haggard Mauling to remove it, and in our next turn, we get to draw and up the Beanstalk. This is perfect, since we get to play it, draw a card for turn 8, and we have a Disciple of Freyalise out here. Now, we need to go ahead and make a choice. Do we need a new hand very badly, or do we not necessarily need it right now? If we cast Disciple of Freyalise, we can get all kinds of free stuff. Honestly, at this stage, I think the best thing we can do is pay... we don't have the green mana available. We spent the green mana, actually, without thinking. So we really only have one option. Let's go ahead and filter out this Twisted Landscape we don't need in order to draw a new card. And it's given us access to a new orb, the Jade Orb of Dragonkind. While we aren't able to use this for anything right now, this will give us hexproof on our commander if it comes back out, which we actually might be ending the game for another player here. Either way, we're going to get another set of double attacks. And there we go. Let's go to turn 9. We play Shadowblood Ridge, and at this stage, we can go ahead and pay 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, get the Disciple of Freyalise on the board, sacrificing Karathis in order to draw 7 cards. We'll also draw an extra card thanks to Up the Beanstalk. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That gives us a very huge hand here. We can play the Soul Ring, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 mana to recast our commander, leaving up everything except the Exotic Orchard, meaning we really lost nothing, and we get to draw an extra card. Karathis comes on the board with a 1/1 counter thanks to the Jade Orb, and now we get to eliminate the final player with a fresh clutch of a hand in case we happen to run out of resources. Hell, at this stage, we can go ahead and play this Swamp and tap 2 to stomp a problematic card on the board and get rid of it. Also, recasting our commander let us get another instance of Dragon Tempest, blowing up yet another card. In any case, we just played a handful of dragons and they threatened our opponents enough to end the game for them, which is all they really need to do. But, I know it's hard to say with a $100 deck, but what upgrades would you make to this if you had access to them? I'm going to make an exception on how I do upgrades this time around. Let's get into that. Because this is a less budgety deck in the first place, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the first things I would upgrade if I had the chance. When you are dealing with a budgetless version of a deck, then the first thing you need to be working on is the land base. I already have a pretty decent land base in here, but if you don't have to worry about budget, then you can go ahead and get the best of the best, like Zeatora's Proving Ground, which is an easy fetchable land. In terms of fetchable lands, you also need to be adding in your shock lands of Blood Crypt, Overgrown Tomb, and Stomping Ground, and the Surveil lands of Underground Mortuary, Raucous Theater, and Commercial District to replace some of the fetchables that are already in the deck. Then I would also add in Llanowar Waste, Sulphurous Springs, and Carplusian Forest, as they are the best of the best in terms of pain lands. They're the only pain lands. I mean, you can run Mount Doom as well, but you're forced to use that life, and you can run the Peat lands, which are technically pain lands, but you are forced to use that life too. So we're going to be running these pain lands, the original pain lands. Just these 10 land upgrades alone effectively finishes off your mana base in terms of what you really care about. But past that, I would also start shoving in some of the best mana ramp you can have. Patchwork Banner giving all of your dragons 1/1, Fanatic of Ronus giving you access to 4 mana whenever you tap it, and 3 visits to be another way to get a forest out of the deck are all fantastic for you to do. But in terms of giant dragons, I would also add in things like Tyrant's Familiar, Earthquake Dragon, Hellkite Tyrant, Beledros Witherbloom, Dragon Broodmother, who's just bad Beledros Witherbloom, Heroic Intervention to protect our stuff, Balefile Dragon to blow up things, Ancient Brass Dragon to have more reanimation, Terror of the Peak since it's probably the best dragon in all of Magic the Gathering, Bone Horde Dracosaur to give us access to more impulse draw, Hellkite Courier or Courser which lets us get our commander out quickly for instant haste. Utvara Hellkite, which gives us more tokens. Cavern Horde Dragon, which gives us more treasures. Klauth, who is the best mana ramp a dragon deck could ever ask for. And Old Gnawbone, who's just another way to get tons and tons of treasure tokens. You could also add in Ancient Brass and Ancient Bronze Dragon, or Ancient Bronze Dragon if you really wanted, and Ancient Copper Dragon. I didn't add them here because I figured y'all are probably already salivating over those anyway. You can grab those if you want. That said, I just wanted a deck that functioned as a love letter to one of my favorite dragons of all time, and I think I did that here. Broodmate Dragon is one of the things that made me love Magic the Gathering as a kid. I started off in the Mirrodin block and then stopped playing after a while to focus on Yu-Gi-Oh! And when I came back to Magic, Broodmate Dragon was there as one of the things shortly after the Ravnica block that I got to play with a ton. I adore this card, and I'm so happy we got another version of it, and I'm so happy I've been able to put this together. This is going to be something I'm building in paper very, very soon. So if you're at my LGS, I want to play this with you. As always, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Let me know what upgrades you would make to the deck. Hit the like button if you haven't already. Subscribe if you haven't already. And as always, everybody, insert end of video tagline here. Hey, just wanted to give a quick thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who help keep me afloat and help keep this channel going. YouTube and Twitch are wonderful platforms, but at the end of the day, stability is not one of their strong suits. If you want to support my channel, then obviously Patreon is one of the best ways of doing that. Link is in the description. But I do want to personally thank everybody who has contributed to the channel. Those people would be Red Joker, Purple Poundini, Jemshin, Britzkrieg, Jupe the Malignant, Michael, Ravalern, Mabbity Babbity, Astral Frontier, Autumn and Angel, Nixie Chan, Agamotto, Victorian Alchemist, I'm not saying the last part of that, and you know that, Arcton Arclacier, Kiratorian, Dren Hadamata, Jordan M, John L, Lord Bleck, Smiling Game Master, and Fireshard. And everyone else who supports my channel and lets me do what I do full-time. This is a dream job of mine that I never believed that I would be able to take full-time, and with your help, I've been able to do it. So thank you so very much for that. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you all enjoy, and I hope you all are having a wonderful time. I will see you all in the next one, hopefully.